China is the fourth largest country in the world, yet 25% of its land is covered by desert, and that number keeps growing. It's also the country with the fastest desertification rate on the planet. Every year, more than 2,500 square kilometers of land turn into desert, an area roughly the size of Shanghai and Hong Kong combined. Even worse, the desert is advancing toward Beijing, now only about 220 kilometers away. In some years, the capital has been hit by as many as 40 to 50 sandstorm days. In Inner Mongolia, this isn't just a story, it's daily life. Every night, residents tape their windows shut because by morning, their entire home could be buried in desert dust. Today, over 400 million people live in areas directly affected by desertification. Sand from the Gobi Desert has even crossed borders, sweeping through South Korea and Japan. And NASA has recorded dust particles drifting as far as California across the Pacific Ocean. So what pushed China to this brink? It began in 1978 when the country's economic reform unleashed massive deforestation and agricultural expansion. Land was overgrazed, and groundwater was pumped so heavily that in some places the water table dropped by up to 10 feet each year. Climate change only made things worse. The three great deserts, Gobi, Taklamakan, and Kibuchi, are among the largest in the world, swallowing villages, hospitals, and schools. Since 1960, their advance has already blown away an estimated $1.22 trillion from China's economy. After realizing their mistakes, the Chinese didn't just stand by and watch the desert creep into their homes. They fought back with the simplest weapon possible: trees. Not thousands, not millions, but billions of them. Since 1981, the National Tree Planting Law has required every citizen between the ages of 11 and 60 to plant 3 to 5 trees each year. What's fascinating is that people don't see it as an obligation, but as a source of pride. Many couples even hold tree planting weddings, placing young saplings into the ground as a promise to build a greener future together. China's most ambitious project is called the Green Great Wall, a 4,500-kilometer stretch of forest across the north, serving as a living barrier to block the advance of the Gobi and Taklamakan deserts. Then, everything changed. In 1958, while workers were building a railway across the desert, one exhausted laborer stuck a bundle of straw into the sand to mark his spot. When a sandstorm swept through, everything else was buried or blown away except that single bundle of straw. When the engineers saw it still standing, they were stunned. If one small bundle could withstand the desert's fury, what would happen if millions of them were planted? Straw holds the sand holds the trees, and the trees hold life. That's how China's checkerboard straw strategy was born. It started in Inner Mongolia and spread to Gansu, Xinjiang, and the borderlands of the Gobi and Taklamakan deserts. The straw wasn't scattered randomly. Environmental engineers first secured stakes in the ground, then laid straw in 1x1 meter squares, forming a giant grid that stretched to the horizon like a living chessboard in the sand. Workers labored in extreme conditions, 104 degrees Fahrenheit, 40 degrees Celsius by day, freezing at night with sweat evaporating the instant it hit the ground. One mistake in fixing the straw, and the entire project could be erased by a single storm within hours. Once the grid was finished, something miraculous happened. The straw squares slowed sand movement by 99.5%. That meant a desert that once shifted 65 feet, 20 meters per year, now stood almost still. The low straw fences bent the wind's path, preventing it from lifting the sand skyward. In Invention, Gansu, once known as the place where deserts meet, studies found that areas within the straw grids retained 200–300% more moisture than bare sand. The straw reduced evaporation, cooled the ground, and trapped dew, one of the desert's rare sources of water. After just 1 or 2 rainy seasons, the first green shoots began to appear. They grew in neat lines not because humans planted them, but because wind and straw worked together to do the job. Over the next 2 to 3 years, the straw gradually decomposed, turning into organic fertilizer that nourished the young roots. As those roots grew stronger, they locked the sand even tighter, and thus— But you know how it is, the desert is vast, and it's still spreading day by day. If China relied only on shovels and manpower, it might take centuries to stop the sand. That's why technology has entered the fight. Since the 2020s, robots and specialized sand-fixing vehicles have appeared on the desert front lines. They can operate under extreme desert conditions tirelessly without rest. With just one button, the system automatically digs trenches, lays down straw grids, and covers them with sand, working 4 to 6 times faster than humans. The straw itself has also evolved. Instead of being bundled by hand, it's now woven into industrial-grade ropes and rolled into massive coils at factories. Its durability lasts up to 6 years, double the traditional method. High above, drones act like mini radar stations. They scan the desert surface, identify areas where sand dunes move most aggressively, and dispatch robots to reinforce them before disaster strikes. Drones also drop seeds encased in water gel capsules, allowing young plants to carry their own moisture and survive the harsh early days. Beneath the sand, sensors monitor moisture levels and geological stability. Artificial intelligence simulates wind direction to predict where the sand might escape its cage next. And when life finally returns, eDNA technology detects the first signs, bacteria, insects, lizards, proof that the soil has truly come back to life. After decades of effort, the first signs of recovery have begun to appear. It started with pollinating insects, ants, and desert butterflies returning to seek out the newly sprouted flowers and grass. When they arrived, desert lizards soon followed, drawn by the promise of food. Then came the desert rabbits, the first cautious footsteps across land once considered dead. And before long, the sky, which had been empty for years, was filled again with flocks of sandbirds. Sometimes you can even spot the faint silhouette of a predator gliding across the pale sky, a clear sign that a complete food chain is returning. Can you feel the change? The once lifeless soil, in just 3 to 5 years, has transformed into a living ecosystem. One with interaction, competition, and most importantly, life. The United Nations has officially recognized China as the world's leading nation in the fight against desertification, an achievement once thought impossible. What's happening here isn't just theory or computer models. The proof is right on Chinese soil. One of the earliest and most remarkable examples is the Baolan Railway, which has crossed the desert since 1958. When it was first built, international experts predicted that shifting sands would bury it within 30 years. But reality proved them wrong. More than 60 years later, not only does the railway still exist, it has become the heart of a revived ecosystem. Along the tracks, you can now see grass, shrubs, and small animal shelters, a green belt running parallel to the railway, standing as living proof of humanity's first victory against the desert. Another example is the Tangier Expressway, completed in 2022. This 6-mile highway cuts straight through one of the most violent sandstorm zones on Earth. Yet, thanks to advanced sand-fixing technology, China saved over 4 million cubic meters of construction materials and more than 600 million liters of water, numbers that reveal the power of green innovation. Even more impressively, what was once a forbidden zone has now become a thriving desert tourism hub. And perhaps most astonishing of all, the Kabuki Desert, once known as the Scythe of Death, is now called China's Green Miracle. Through an integrated model combining ecological restoration with economic development, the desert size has been reduced by 1/3 in just a few decades. From sand, China has created solar energy farms, medicinal agriculture, and ecotourism, turning a place no one dared to enter into a land of opportunity and profit. But as you know, every victory comes with a price. Many of the newly greened areas were planted with only a few species, mainly poplars and saxaul trees. From a distance, they form impressive patches of green, but scientists call them green deserts. That's because a forest made up of just one species is hardly an ecosystem at all. After 10 to 20 years, many regions have reported mass die-offs, leaving behind once recovered lands that have fallen back into desolation. Worse still, these anti-sand immigrant trees consume enormous amounts of groundwater. Some species can absorb 150 to 200 liters per day. Think about that in one of the driest regions on Earth. If the roots of these trees drain the underground aquifers, could we actually be accelerating desertification instead of stopping it? And as the climate continues to warm, parts of northern China have become too harsh for trees to survive long term. That's why the debate between scientists and the government is never really ended. But we can't deny the impact of this project, because this story isn't just changing China's future. What was once seen as a self-rescue invention has now become an exportable technology. In Saudi Arabia, where 95% of the land is desert, Chinese experts have begun implementing the artificial green belt model across the scorching sands. In the past, people talked only about oil. Now they're talking about growing forests in the desert. And the numbers prove it. In 2024 alone, China's exports of green technology to Saudi Arabia exceeded $40 billion, with most investments focused on environmental engineering and clean energy. In Pakistan's Kholistan region, once buried under relentless heat and drought, Chinese specialists are now helping plant windbreak forests, build green straw stations, and create protective belts around villages. Astonishingly, China's desertification control model has been officially recognized by the United Nations as a global benchmark and inspiration for Africa, the Middle East, and even Latin America. China isn't stopping at small victories, it's aiming for something far bolder. By 2050, the country has set an unprecedented goal to completely eliminate desertification caused by human activity. That means lands once destroyed by overgrazing, groundwater depletion, and reckless deforestation will be fully restored not just to survive, but to thrive again. The massive defense wall they're building today, known as the Green Great Wall, is only part of a much larger vision to become the Green Wall of Humanity, with China leading the charge to protect the planet from the global threat of desertification. Strangely enough, deserts once seen as hell on Earth are now becoming treasures of the future. The Gobi, Kibuchi, and Taklamakan are transforming into hubs for renewable energy, ecotourism, medicinal agriculture, and green industries. Solar energy alone from these deserts is estimated to generate hundreds of billions of dollars each year. But if you think China's fight against desertification is just a technical problem, you're missing the most important part. In reality, this isn't a battle between people and sand. It's a battle between two philosophies of development. On one side, short-term exploitation. On the other, long-term correction. One side sees land as a resource to be squeezed dry, while the other treats land as a living entity that must be nurtured. Deserts don't just appear out of nowhere. For thousands of years, most arid land stayed in balance. They only became deadly when humans disrupted the cycles of water, wind, and life. When forests were cut down for charcoal, when grasslands were grazed to the roots, when groundwater was pumped faster than it could recover, deserts stopped being a natural phenomenon and became a byproduct of civilization. What sets China apart isn't how many trees they've planted, but that they dared to admit to systemic mistakes. Very few countries are willing to publicly acknowledge that decades of development pushed them to the brink of ecological collapse. It's even rarer for a country to reverse its policies and sacrifice short-term growth to save its long-term foundation. Just look at world history. The United States had the Dust Bowl and nightmare in the 1930s when millions of acres of farmland turned into a sea of dust because of bad plowing practices. The Soviet Union almost wiped out the Aral Sea in just a few decades by diverting rivers for cotton farming. The Middle East has been pumping ancient groundwater hundreds of times faster than it can be replaced. Africa is losing fertile soil to poor farming and ongoing conflict. What do all these disasters have in common? It's not a lack of technology, it's not a lack of money, it's a lack of ecological patience. Desertification is a uniquely dangerous enemy because it doesn't kill people right away. It creeps in slowly, silently, one grain of sand at a time. By the time you notice, it's too late. The land can't hold water, trees can't take root, and people are forced to leave. And when people leave, the land dies completely. China understands this because they've been at the final stage of this cycle. Millions of people in Inner Mongolia, Gansu, and Ningxia were once ecological refugees, not fleeing war, but fleeing sand. Schools closed because students left their villages. Hospitals stood empty because doctors couldn't live through the dust storms. Villages vanished from the map without a single bullet being fired. That nightmare made China's fight against desertification not just a policy, but a matter of national survival. But this is also where the tough questions begin. How far do humans have the right to redesign nature? Is turning deserts green always the right thing to do? Where's the line between restoring nature and imposing on it? Many scientists warn that not every desert should be green. Deserts are ancient ecosystems home to species that have evolved to survive harsh conditions. If you turn every desert into a forest, you might accidentally wipe out species that can only live in the sand. This is the ecological moral paradox, saving land for humans, but possibly erasing wild nature. China doesn't shy away from this debate. In fact, in recent years, their strategy has changed dramatically. Instead of greening at all costs, new projects focus on stabilizing the sand first, then increasing biodiversity. Instead of planting thirsty trees, they prioritize native grasses and low-spreading shrubs. Instead of forcing forests where there's no water, they accept that some desert will remain, but it will be stable and not keep spreading. This is a sign of maturity in thinking. Because fighting desertification isn't about turning everything into a forest, it's about stopping a chain reaction of collapse. A piece of land doesn't have to be lush green to survive, it just needs to be stable enough to hold water, support microbes, and keep the door open for recovery. That's why the straw checkerboard model is considered one of the smartest ecological solutions of the 21st century. It doesn't force nature, but slows down destruction and gives nature a chance to heal itself. And this has global meaning, because in the 21st century, desertification isn't just a problem for a few poor countries, it's knocking on the doors of the world's biggest economies. California is facing record drought, Spain is losing farmland faster than ever, Australia is watching dead land spread despite world-class technology. Even Europe, which once thought it was immune, is now facing land degradation. The world is entering an era where the question isn't how fast can we develop, but how much land do we have left to develop? In this context, China's story becomes a controversial but unavoidable example. It shows a hard truth. Sometimes, only when we hit rock bottom do we finally change. And from here, an even bigger question appears. If a country that once caused the fastest desertification in the world can reverse that trend, what's stopping the rest of humanity? Is it because we lack straw? No. Robots? No. Technology? Definitely not. What we lack is the will to pay the price today so we can survive tomorrow. Fighting desertification doesn't bring instant profits. It doesn't deliver spectacular GDP numbers in a short term, but it determines whether our children and grandchildren will have land to stand on. And that's the point where this story goes beyond China. It becomes the story of every nation, every civilization that ever thought it could exploit nature without limits. Because in the end, the desert doesn't care who you are. It doesn't care about borders, ideologies, or military power. It just keeps moving forward, one grain of sand at a time, until there's nothing left to swallow. What do you think about this enormous gamble? If deserts around the world adopted the same methods, could we truly stop desertification and make Earth greener? Share your thoughts in the comments. Let's discuss. And if you love stories of miraculous environmental recovery like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next episode.